B. Collins.
Peter B. Collins, news and comment. It's Tuesday, June 26, 2018. It's a dark day in America as the United States Supreme Court ignored the obvious evidence of Trump's deep animus, bias, racism toward Muslims, and found that the Trump travel ban 3.0 is constitutional. It is a strain of rational thinking. It is a convoluted approach to reach a desired outcome by selectively ignoring the obvious factors that drove people to bring cases all the way to the United States Supreme Court. And in a 5-4 decision, where Justice Kennedy shows that he is no longer the swing vote on critical matters, the court upheld the president's travel ban, as I say, 3.0. The first two were practice sessions, and in a remarkable process where they can filter out the hateful statements, the obvious bias that Trump shows, his personal fear that is not affirmed by any kind of data collection or processing or argument to show that people from specific countries pose a threat to the security of the United States. I mean, words fail me because, you reach for Orwell, you reach for Kafka, and in this case, we just keep reaching, and there's nothing there. And I heard Rush Limbaugh this morning gloating, and how he can define things in such an ass-backwards way. But he said the people who try to use Trump's tweets, his public statements, and his actions as president as arguments to claim that the travel ban was tainted by his bias. They are part of the authoritarian left, says Limbaugh. And it is authoritarianism that the Supreme Court has upheld today. Now, I want to recognize a couple of things at the beginning here. It is fair to say that under existing law and Supreme Court precedents, that a sitting president has pretty expansive powers to deal with immigration in an executive manner. But that does not permit those decisions to be driven by factors that are clearly in violation of constitutional protections. And so Trump tells his Twitter fans that he wrote a Muslim ban. But when it's presented to the Supreme Court, it's sanitized. Oh, this isn't a Muslim ban. No, it affects people in Venezuela, too. There are no Muslims in Venezuela, see? And there are a lot of Muslim-dominated countries that aren't on the list, see? And these arguments are so specious, presented in such a facile manner, that it leaves me shaking my bald head here and saying, is this my country? And the only positive aspect of this for me is that one of Obama's appointees, Justice Sonia Sotomayor, is surfacing and courageously speaking up as if she's channeling the late, great liberal justice, William O. Douglas, a man who feared nobody. So she noted that Trump had made anti-Muslim statements as a candidate, as president, that he called for a total and complete ban on Muslims entering the United States, tweeted that we need a travel ban for certain dangerous countries. Let the gravity of those statements sink in, Sotomayor wrote. Most of these words were spoken or written by the current president of the United States. She dismissed the majority's argument that the government made its case that the travel ban is necessary for national security, saying that no matter how much the government tried to launder the president's statements, all of the evidence points in one direction. And get this, Sotomayor was joined in her blistering dissent by only one other justice, RBG, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who holds the Douglas chair, in my opinion, right now. Then we get the milder dissent from Justice Elena Kagan, the first appointee by Obama, and hardly a liberal, and Justice Stephen Breyer. They questioned whether the administration could be trusted to enforce what was called the proclamation's elaborate system of exemptions and waivers. Now, that intentionally misses the real thrust of what is evil about Trump's travel ban. And so this Supreme Court today interprets the Constitution in ways that are prejudged, predetermined, to benefit Republicans, conservatives, and as we'll get to in a minute, giving special status to anti-abortion activists who are permitted to deceive pregnant women as they try to steer them away from potentially choosing abortion. Oh, and one more quote from Sotomayor. The travel ban, she said, being upheld by the court, merely replaces one gravely wrong decision with another. Now, it's fair to say, and it pains me to say this, that this is a big win for Donald J. Trump. It is, unfortunately, vindication of his bizarre fears, his pandering to the most racist and intentionally low information extremists in this country. It's a victory for his fear-based worldview. He gloated, "This ruling is a moment of profound vindication following months of hysterical commentary from the media and Democratic politicians who refuse to do what it takes to secure our border and our country. As long as I'm president, I'll defend the sovereignty, safety, and security of the American people and fight for an immigration system that serves the national interests of the United States and its citizens. Our country will always be safe, secure, and protected on my watch." Wow. Sickening. It's truly sickening. It is so unhinged from reality. And he's just been given a big boost by the Supreme Court. In the last few days, he's been talking about clear violations of the Constitution by suggesting that we can just send people who cross the border back without any court proceedings, no due process, just summarily eject them. Now, when we get to analyze the decision, I have a few comments to make. Because Chief Justice Roberts, who wrote this word salad, does acknowledge that the plaintiffs in the case believe that the president's bias, his animus, is so apparent that it nullifies the legitimacy of the executive order that he issued. And so, by paying lip service to those complaints, Roberts sets the stage for saying, never mind, doesn't matter what he said because the order itself is neutral. The proclamation is facially neutral toward religion, wrote Roberts. Plaintiffs asked the court to probe the sincerity of the stated justifications for the policy by reference to extrinsic statements, many of which were made before the president took the oath of office. But that doesn't mean we have to ignore them. They're extrinsic. Therefore, Roberts and his conservative allies can put on their foggy glasses and say, I can't see any racial bias here. And the judgment, the decision reads, as a result, we consider plaintiffs' extrinsic evidence, but will uphold the policy so long as it can be reasonably be understood to result from a justification independent of unconstitutional grounds. I mean, they have created this artifice that they can separate the president's unconstitutional ravings from this statement, this order that was written by professionals who were able to sanitize it from his poisonous public statements. Again, quoting from Roberts, "It cannot be said that it's impossible to discern a relationship to legitimate state interests, or that the policy is inexplicable by anything but animus. Indeed, the dissent can only attempt to argue otherwise by refusing to apply anything resembling rational basis review. But because there is persuasive evidence that the entry suspension has a legitimate grounding in national security concerns quite apart from any religious hostility, we must accept that independent justification." He is taking rational thinking and logic and turning it on its proverbial ear with no evidence, not even good legal citations, to support this arbitrary decision. One more bite here. The entry suspension is an act that is well within executive authority and could have been taken by any other president. The only question is evaluating the actions of this particular president in promulgating an otherwise valid proclamation. Remember Sergeant Schultz? I know I'm dating myself, but the old Hogan's Heroes comedy show that was set in a German POW camp? And Sergeant Schultz was this doofus who would catch the Americans violating the rules, and then he would say, "I see nothing, I hear nothing. I see nothing, I hear nothing." Sergeant Schultz is the spirit of today's Supreme Court decision. And a good critique of this from Leah Littman. She's an assistant professor of law, University of California, Irvine. She said the court's decision to uphold the ban illustrates how immigration has become a Constitution light zone. And she talks about the contradictory recent rulings. In the Colorado bake shop for a gay couple case, it attempted to penalize a baker's refusal to sell a cake to a same-sex couple. And they used the extraordinary excuse. They found that the Colorado Civil Rights Commission decision-making process was infected by religious hostility because one commissioner had expressed the belief that it's despicable to invoke religion in order to harm others. And the professor continues, in Trump versus Hawaii, however, that's the case here, the court declined to reach a similar conclusion about the decision-making process that led to the entry ban. The majority of the justices avoided saying the entry ban was tainted by religious animus, even though Trump had promised a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States and declared that Islam hates us. In explaining its 5-4 decision, the majority invoked a set of legal rules that limit the ability of the federal courts to assess decisions related to immigration, and specifically, determinations about who may enter the United States. These rules have their roots in century-old decisions embracing the plenary power doctrine, which gives the political branches, and in recent times the president in particular, something of a blank check over immigration matters. Later, she writes, the court now justifies the broad authority of the political branches over immigration in terms other than naked racism, but papering over the racial origins of the political branches' sweeping immigration authority can only do so much. Invoking the president's near plenary authority over immigration allowed the court, in effect, to turn a blind eye to racism. As Justice Sotomayor observed in her dissent, the majority blindly accepted the government's misguided invitation to sanction a discriminatory policy motivated by animosity toward a disfavored group, all in the name of a superficial claim of national security. You go, Sonia. And finally, Professor Littman closes by saying today the Supreme Court told the president he's right, and that courts will not stop him from subjecting migrants to discriminations and abuses that this administration could not impose on citizens. The question is whether the rest of us will step up and stop the administration instead. Pretty strong words there. Well expressed. Now to the backlash against Trump administration officials who've been heckled in public, forced out of restaurants. Over the weekend, a senior staffer unnamed of Homeland Security found a charred, headless rodent carcass on the doorstep of his home. And I do understand that this can go too far. But Donald Trump is seizing on this to declare that his incivility is protected. He can make fun of Maxine Waters. He can imply that because she's black, she has a low IQ, and get away with it. He is uncivil, practices incivility on a daily basis. But when they're on the receiving end, Trumpistas all circle their wagons, they become victims. That kind of authoritarian liberalism that Limbaugh's talking about becomes some sort of a cause celeb of theirs. And so now Trump is trying to link Maxine Waters, whom Nancy Pelosi tried to politely distance herself from yesterday, with this tweet. The face of the Democrats is now Maxine Waters, who together with Nancy Pelosi have established a fine leadership team. Now, Maxine is not on the leadership team. And Nancy, as I said, doesn't want to embrace this. She talked about civility from sea to shining sea yesterday. Trump's tweet continues, Pelosi and Waters should always stay together and lead the Democrats who want open borders and unlimited crime well into the future and pick crooked Hillary for president. Jesus. And here's the problem. I recognize that Maxine Waters is now a punching bag for Republicans. She'll be used in campaign ads for the primaries that are left in November. But the Democrats are saying that taking the high road is going to lead them somewhere. And yesterday I pointed out that the high road doesn't go to the same place, the same destination, as Trump's low road. And it's the same bullshit about impeachment. I realize with the current composition of the Congress, the Democrats advocating impeachment will not lead to an immediate set of actions. But you have to build the case, and Democrats should be running on that this year because they claim that Trump is this existential threat to the future of the United States. And in many ways he is. But they won't impeach him. They won't argue. They won't stand for impeachment. And now they won't stand for Maxine Waters, and they're simply going to get rolled over. And again, I am not calling for, just out-and-out hostility at all times. You got to pick your battles. But to unilaterally disarm in the interests of civility and politeness, that's not going to cut it in the current toxic climate. The nation's top border security official has confirmed that they've temporarily ended zero tolerance in deference to catch and release, which was the policy that Trump derided. Kevin McAleenan, Commissioner of Customs and Border Protection, said that he and the Justice Department should agree on a policy where adults who bring their kids across the border can be prosecuted without an extended separation from their children. But they're admitting they don't have enough detention space, and as a result, many families will be quickly released into the United States with a promise to return for a court hearing. So this is a contrived controversy. The Republicans had to know how many bed spaces they had to imprison people. And Sarah Huckabee Sanders spins it this way: we're not changing the policy, we're simply out of resources, trying to get more. And Jefferson Beauregard Jim Crow Sessions III contradicted McAleenan, vowing Monday to continue the zero-tolerance policy. And now there are a lot of people on the left who are calling to abolish ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement. And as I mentioned yesterday, I'm quite sympathetic to the call. However, it does produce political liabilities where Trump can attack any Democrat who says they want to abolish ICE because you're for crime and open borders and crooked Hillary. So our junior senator here in California, Kamala Harris, who is frequently mentioned as a possible Democratic candidate in 2020, she is very deftly dealing with this issue. She said, I think there's no question that we've got to critically re-examine ICE and its role and the way it is being administered. And we need probably to think about starting from scratch. But she acknowledged that ICE has a purpose, ICE has a role, ICE should exist, but let's not abuse the power. And other Democrats are saying, I don't want to get anywhere near this call to abolish ICE because it could be the end of my political career. I could be demagogued by Republicans if I do. But there are Democratic challengers for House seats, 19 of them, who have called for shutting down ICE, and 4 Democratic incumbents, including Mark Pecan, who is the progressive from Madison, Wisconsin, and he's talking about setting up a commission to evaluate the work of ICE with the idea of either abolishing it or developing a substitute. So Trump launched this trade war. It's incoherent, it is arbitrary, it's emotional, and it's unclear. At any given moment, nobody knows if they are facing a tariff, if they have to pay a tariff, if importing something is going to cost more. And I'll give you an example. Just this morning, we were at a showroom to buy some new deck doors for our house. The ones we like are made in Canada. And at this point, we have been guaranteed that if we order them today, we will not face a tariff, but the rates are going up as early as August 3rd. And that can have many unintended consequences and ripple effects. And yesterday, Harley-Davidson announced that in order to get around the European tariffs that have been imposed in reaction to Trump's tariffs, that they would begin manufacturing motorcycles outside the United States to sell in the European market. Now, I don't support offshoring in general, but given the circumstances, this is an understandable decision by the executives at Harley. So Trump is all over them on Twitter, denouncing them, saying that they'll lose their aura if they produce bikes overseas. They already do that. They have a manufacturing plant in Thailand. And then he threatened. He bullied. If they move, watch it. It will be the beginning of the end. They surrendered. They quit, he wrote. The aura will be gone and they will be taxed like never before. And then, demonstrating the official confusion that is so often Donald Trump, he said, Harley must know that they won't be able to sell back into U.S. without paying a big tax. Now, Harley isn't attempting to do that. They're going to manufacture outside the United States so they don't have to pay tariffs on the bikes they sell in Europe. They're not planning to re-import bikes to the United States. And in the polite language of the New York Times, Trump's suggestion appeared to misunderstand or misconstrue the fact that Harley would be using its overseas production facilities to sell motorcycles in Europe, not back into the United States. As mentioned, there was another stinky decision that came out of the Supreme Court today, and it affects a California law. Now, you need to understand that California passed this law after an investigation found that 200 abortion counseling centers across the state used, quote, intentionally deceptive advertising and counseling practices that often confuse, misinform, and even intimidate women from making fully informed, time-sensitive decisions about critical health care. That's the polite way of saying that a pregnant woman who went to one of these clinics was lied to and was not given full information about her options and her legal rights. And so the Supreme Court decided that in a really screwy, fuzzy decision, that this law likely violates the Supreme Court. Now, God damn it, the job of the Supreme Court is to decide what violates the First Amendment and what doesn't. And to issue a ruling where they say that it likely violates the First Amendment, it's juvenile. This is subpar work. And I hope that the next case about abortion that comes to the Supreme Court is one of these pretextual laws from Texas or Mississippi that requires doctors to give misinformation provably false data to women who are seeking an abortion, telling them it might increase their chances for breast cancer. That is not true. But in 6 states, doctors are required to read official statements to women and mislead them in this official fashion. And it was Clarence Thomas who wrote this opinion. And he is a hopeless anti-abortion advocate. Now, what could happen here is that the court may be bound by this precedent, and they may overturn laws that promote the lies that the doctors are required to recite to women that I just referred to. We can hope. Every day I pause for a second to thank the people who support my work here at the Peter B. Collins Podcast with your subscriptions. Great people like Judy Holloway, Benny Alto, Patrick Garay, and Susan Lundgren. I need your help to keep this all going. You need to take out a subscription today, my friend, if you're not already a subscriber, and assuming you can afford it. So visit peterbcollins.com, click on the menu tab, pull down Become a Subscriber. When you get to the sign-up page, you've got options. And should you choose to secure our $50 annual subscription, I've got a bonus gift for you. It's a copy of John Dist's new powerful rock and roll CD called American University. It's a theme CD based on JFK, his assassination, and the cover-up, and I highly recommend it. I'd love to send you a copy. Just take out a new annual subscription and give me a mailing address in the continental U.S. Another court action that doesn't surprise me, a federal district judge here in San Francisco, William Alsop, has tossed out a bunch of lawsuits that were filed by San Francisco, Oakland, Marin County, other jurisdictions against the big oil companies, accusing them of being responsible for the damage caused by climate change. And we learned recently that right where I'm sitting, here in Marin County, we are the county at the greatest risk in the entire state of California from sea level rise. And Judge Alsop did his diligence. He did an exhaustive kind of seminar on climate change that occurred in his courtroom. But he concluded that Congress and the White House, not the judiciary, are responsible for addressing the fallout from fossil fuels. The problem deserves a solution on a more vast scale than can be supplied by a district judge or jury in a public nuisance case. And he also went on to say, hey, we've been benefiting from these fossil fuels for a long time. There is a legacy issue. The deck was stacked. And Reality Winner had to face, pardon the pun, reality. Under the Espionage Act, she could not assert why she leaked information to The Intercept from her position as a contractor for the National Security Agency. And today in Augusta, Georgia, she changed her plea to guilty. Now, she wasn't sentenced on the spot, but the deal that's been struck will probably leave her in prison for a 5-year stretch. She should get credit for time served, about a year, but that will be clarified in a few weeks when sentencing is completed. By comparison, Jeffrey Sterling, the CIA officer who was convicted of 7 counts of violating the Espionage Act, he got 42 months. Now, he never should have been prosecuted either, but that does give you a bit of a comparison. At one point, the judge asked Winner whether she was mentally competent to change her plea. Winner informed the court she was suffering from an eating disorder and depression and was taking medication. This appeared to be part of the toll of a year of imprisonment. And Jennifer Solari, the government prosecutor, called a special agent named Justin Garrick to the stand to present what happened when Winner disclosed the report to The Intercept. Garrick said he became aware of the disclosure when a representative of the outlet contacted the government agency to verify the authenticity of the report that Winner disclosed. Winner had sent The Intercept a hard copy in the mail through the U.S. Postal Service. And we know that it was the Intercept's reporter, Matthew Cole, who took the hard copy that Reality Winner sent made a photocopy and sent it to a government contact to try to verify its credibility. And in doing so, it led them directly to Reality Winner. And so today at The Intercept, the apologist for this deep, deep failure of journalism practices is Trevor Timm. And I generally respect Trevor Timm. He helped found the Internet Freedom of the Press Foundation. No, it's Freedom of the Press Foundation, no Internet in that title. But for some reason, he has been selected and he's accepted the role of being the apologist for The Intercept. So he wrote a piece about the new plea deal from Reality Winner, and getting to the crux of the matter, he says on June 5th last year, The Intercept published a story detailing attempts by alleged Russian hackers to break into state election infrastructure, widely believed to be based on the document Winner pled guilty to releasing. So they're playing this game, even at this stage, that they will neither confirm nor deny that Reality Winner was their source. But they also won't confirm or deny that Matthew Cole was responsible for burning Reality Winner, just like Matthew Cole in previous episodes burned John Kiriakou and burned Joe Hickman. And if you want more information, you can hear it in the words of Kiriakou and Hickman themselves. Just Google their names in the search, or just enter them into the search window at peterbcollins.com. And our podcast from a year ago will come up. So this is shoddy journalism. It's yellow journalism. And it shows that if you're going to leak, don't leak to The Intercept, and don't trust Matthew Cole. The New York Times is giving us a little more transparency into the case of its reporter Allie Watkins, who had all of her electronic devices seized by the FBI earlier this year. It comes out of their investigation into James Wolfe. He was 53 when he started dating the 22-year-old intern, and he was married. So they had a secret relationship for several years. Watkins stoutly maintains that she never accepted any secret information from her boyfriend. And after the affair ended, a weird guy surfaced and took her out for a drink. His name was Rambo. And Rambo said, hey, tell us about this guy Wolfe. And tell us about, he knew details of a recent trip she had made with Wolfe to Europe. And then she did not disclose to her employers at the New York Times the seizure of her devices by the FBI for a 4-month period. Now, I've linked to the article from the New York Times, it was published yesterday, about this case. And to be fair to the Times, they were blindsided by Allie Watkins' secrecy, and they are in a catch-up mode. But they've been investigating this for a while. They say they haven't found any taints to her reporting. She still works for the New York Times. They're finally working up a little bit of vituperation about the First Amendment implications of seizing a reporter's records. And Ryan Grimm, who was her boss at the Huffington Post, said, what I see is the Trump administration grabbing a reporter's records and tricking the press into writing about her sex life. It's appalling what the Trump administration is doing, and I don't think you should enable it. But I have to say that the typical outrage the New York Times expresses over First Amendment violations and the creeping of the police state, they're kind of muted in this story. So I encourage you to check it out. You may have your own reactions. Feel free to share them with me. My email is peter@peterbcollins.com. Got a letter from prison. Michael Foster, one of the valve turners, who was convicted for going on to private property and personally shutting down the Keystone Pipeline. The good news is he has been given an early release date, and he'll be out on August 1st. And finally today, I want to share with you the passing of a legend in American Top 40 radio. going back to the golden era in the 1960s and 1970s, Dan Ingram was one of the big stars at WABC in New York. And I got to know Dan. We spent 11 years together working as members of the National Board of the union AFTRA, now merged with the Screen Actors Guild. We represented radio and TV performers, among others. And Dan Ingram never gave me any starstruck bullshit. He was a really good guy, and a person who, despite his status as a big star, spent years supporting the union and supporting the interests of rank-and-file members. So as we say goodbye to Dan, I went to YouTube and found this air check from WABC on July 4th of 1968. And I want to point out we're joining this at the end of a newscast. Then you're going to hear the station ID, which is performed by a separate announcer who had a special position in the union contract. And the staff announcer gave the station ID twice an hour, and that's all they did. Ah, the great days of feather bedding. And here's Dan Ingram in a very interesting little salute to America on its birthday that has some resonance today.
Tomorrow mostly sunny with the highest 75 to 80. Partly cloudy later in the day with a chance of a few showers. Right now 70 degrees in New York under cloudy skies. News at 55 and 25.
WABC, New York.
More music on
77 WABC. It was Winston Churchill who said it. I think he said it better than any other person I've ever heard. He said, and you have to listen to all of this, democracy is the worst form of government, except for all the others. Happy birthday, America. I love you. We got music power for you from now to 7 on your Dan Ingram Shambles. It's the Ohio Express, number 8. Yummy, yummy, yummy. Yummy, yummy, yummy.
Dan Ingram passed away in Florida last weekend at the age of 83. Rock on, brother. Happy trails to you, Dan Ingram. And thanks for listening. I'm Peter B. Collins.
Happy trails to you until we meet again. Happy trails.